Hey guys, and welcome back to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel for another interview. I'm Connor, and joining me today is Teneisha Collins to chat all about starring in the new Netflix film Fatherhood alongside Kevin Hart. If you enjoy this interview or the others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. So welcome, Teneisha, and thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks for having me here today, Connor.
For sure. And obviously, I suppose it's kind of looking at your acting career. I know you've been on like television series such as The Bold Type or Future Man, but like, I suppose like who or what first inspired you to start acting?
You know what? It was a teacher in primary school that inspired me. When I was 8 years old, one of my old teachers, who used to be an actor,
Hmm.
started a theater program in my school where she basically empowered us little kids to take our favorite stories and rewrite them
Hmm.
as plays and perform them. And my first play at 8 years old, I I did a gender bending role. I played Santa Claus, and I have to say, the first time I stepped on stage, I was hooked. I also had the benefit, I think, around the same age, to be in a music video, and being in front of the camera was just so mesmerizing to me that I don't think I ever stopped thinking about it from that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose then when other people, like your experience of starting acting like professionally, do you think there's anything people are surprised by, like going into that industry?
What are people surprised about going into the industry?
Yeah.
Um, I think that a lot of people, especially um, that's not I was gonna say especially adults, but it doesn't really matter. I feel like a lot of people feel that if I have talent, that's all I need, and they jump in and they expect things to move really, really quickly.
Hmm.
But my career's been a slow burn. I got my first agent at the age of 10. People, I think, don't realize that just like if I'm a musician, I need to train, I need to practice on top of that. If I'm an athlete, even if I'm, the biggest footballer, they're training and they're practicing. It's the same with an actor. There's training, you have to practice, you have to work at it constantly. And even when you do get to a certain level of recognition, you're always working on something, whether it's an accent, whether it's for a particular character. It's a continuous learning field that I think that not everybody realizes. And a lot of people expect to come in and they're like, you know what? I have talent. I'm going to walk in here. They're going to love me, and I'm going to, book the lead in the next movie coming out. And that happens sometimes, but that's not usually how it works.
Hmm. Yeah, and I suppose kind of jumping forward in time regarding like your career, I know you were in the new Netflix film Fatherhood, starring Kevin Hart, and I suppose like when you were auditioning, like did you know that like Kevin Hart was attached, or how much information were you privy to at the time?
So I did know that Kevin was attached. At
Hmm.
that point, when I was auditioning, he was the only person announced at the time.
Okay.
So I had no idea who was playing Maddie, who is Melody Hurd, and I had no idea that Alfred Woodard, who is one of my idols, was in the project as well,
Hmm.
or Paul Reiser. That was announced later on during the process. So for me, the only thing I knew was that Kevin Hart was attached to this project, and because it's based on a true story, I was able to do my research and find out about what really happened in this story, and that journey that they've made and how they got to make the movie. So I actually, compared to a lot of projects that are really shrouded in secrecy,
Yeah.
I had the benefit that because it was a true story, there was so much at my disposal. I could easily, buy Matt Logelin's memoir, Two Kisses for Maddie, to learn about the story, which is what the movie's based on, which is
Hmm.
very rare, but I'm very, very happy that I had that opportunity in advance.
Yeah, and I suppose then like as a true story, like the whole idea of like spoilers isn't really applicable in the same way as an original like idea. But like I suppose then, how would you describe how your character is like involved in this story, and like uh, is there like a real life counterpart to your character, or are they like an original addition to this?
So, I yes and no. I don't know if I'm an amalgamation of multiple real people or if I'm just
Right.
one real person. But I do know, having spoken to the real Matt Logelin, that the situation did happen.
Hmm.
So my character, I play Ms. Burns, who is basically, in this movie, we follow this father and his newborn till the age of 7. So I play 7-year-old Maddie's teacher,
Right.
and go to a very, rule abiding Catholic school. And my role, even though I'm an educator and I'm a nurturer, is also to try to enforce these rules. And even though I have the best intentions, unfortunately, some of my actions do create a lot of friction in the story. Um, I mean, that's not really a secret. You know, Maddie was raised by Matt, who was a guy's guy,
Right.
without much female influence when they were, you know, where they were living. So a lot that wasn't a secret, but there's a lot of the storyline that maybe people don't really know unless they've actually read the memoir or were following Matt's story when it was just a blog. So I'd like to keep that secretive until the movie comes out, but definitely my character does create conflict while trying to do her best and trying to be well. She's not the villain, but inevitably, you
Right.
know, she ends up, you know, shifting the story in not necessarily a positive way.
Yeah, and then I suppose then as someone who like knows both the real story and then also like the script that you read, do you think other people who know the real story will be surprised, or do you think they'd have a pretty good idea of what to expect?
I think I think people who have read the story maybe won't be surprised because the real Matt Logelin has a great sense of humor.
Mm,
He's an amazing, like they're an amazing family overall. He has a great sense of humor. He's down to earth, and Kevin really, you know, he brought himself to the role, but he also brought a lot of Matt qualities to the role. I think what people actually who aren't familiar with Matt's real story would be surprised is that the fact that Matt's a white guy. This is
right,
not a story about a black family. This is a story about a father and his daughter, and that love and that story transcends race and culture and diversity, which is a lot of people are shocked to see. But I can't think of a better person to play this role than Kevin at this stage, having witnessed his evolution into this role.
yeah, and again, I suppose like at least over here in the UK, it's Father's Day on June 20th, which is like around the time the film's coming out. Is it the same in North America?
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah,
Father's Day is June 20th, and the release is Father's Day weekend, June 18th. So it's
yeah,
really this movie I feel is a gift to fathers because it's not you don't see a lot of movies with fathers, let alone single fathers, you know, black single fathers, um, you know, in this light. And yeah, you see the struggles, you see the humor, but you see the love and the care as well. So to me, this is like a love letter to all the fathers out there.
yeah. And actually, believe it or not, you're actually not the first person I've spoken to who's worked with Kevin Hart. And the other person that I spoke to, like, described him as like being very, very delightful. Like that's a quote I took from that conversation. Like, does your experience reflect that as well?
Oh my God, you know, Kevin, like I mean, I'd seen his movies. I love his comedy, but this is a family drama, right? So I didn't really
Mm,
know what to expect. But Kevin, like, lovely is the best way to put it. He's a delight to work with. You know, the Kevin that you see on stage is the Kevin that you meet in person. He's very charismatic. He's energetic. You know, he's not the tallest man, but he feels like he's 6 feet tall
right.
because he has that confidence and that gravitas. But for me, the benefit of working with him, and I think something that people will see as well in this movie, is you get to see the softer side of Kevin as well. I got to witness, you know, while he was shooting in Montreal. Montreal is one of the comedy capitals of the world.
Right.
So after long, you know, 18-hour days of shooting, he'd go and perform stand up to work out new material for his next show. And he, you know, was producing a radio show and he was developing all these movies. And I got to see just how hardworking he is. And once again, it ties back to what I said before, where the work never stops. You're constantly evolving. He's one of the hardest working people that I know. And we had a lot of laughs, but we also had a lot of heart to heart moments on the set that were very profound. And I think that you don't get to see that profound side of Kevin publicly a lot. I think, you know, in 2020 and 2021, he released some projects, you know, some documentaries that really showed a different side of him,
Yeah.
but I got to actually experience that firsthand. You know, he's somebody who he's super caring. At the end of the shoot, he gave key cast and crew members this beautiful piece of memorabilia from the movie that was just so thoughtful that I would never have imagined to give to somebody that I will
Right.
always cherish. And that's the kind of person that he is. You know, I'm a teacher, so we worked with a lot of children on set. There were days when we had, you know, 40 children on set as, doing background performances and actors as well. And with
Mm.
kids, they're unpredictable. So you
Yeah.
never really know, in the middle of a scene, a kid will stop and be like, I know you, you're Kevin Hart. Or they'll tug on my skirt and start talking to me. And he rolled with the punches. He talked to every kid who spoke to him. He gave them high fives. He gave them hugs. Like, you could tell that he's a good parent because of how amazing he was with those kids. So for me, this whole project was a gift to me. And working with
Mm.
Kevin was such a gift because his energy, his drive, and his outlook on life is infectious. And it
Yeah.
aligned a lot with how I felt, but it just amplified the way that I live my life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you just said there, I mean, I thought it was very well put because I think a lot of people would think they have an idea of what Kevin Hart would be like just because, the public persona he puts forward. But obviously, speaking as someone who's got to know him personally, I thought, yeah, again, yeah, just really well put, and I think definitely a better idea of more of the man as opposed to because I know some of his characters you can maybe draw similarities between, but yeah, I think yeah for sure you've definitely explained what he's like very eloquently.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose because obviously you mentioned like the whole like the work and the working process, and like I know because this is for Netflix, how would you say that experience was different to, I guess, a non-Netflix production?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's a feature film. The
Right,
Initially the movie was supposed to have a theatrical release. It was,
right.
we filmed this in 2019 pre-pandemic.
Mm,
Um, and it was a Sony picture, and the pandemic shifted. They delayed the release date as much as possible. And perfectly, Kevin inked a four-figure deal with Netflix. So it got acquired by Netflix and the Obama's Higher Ground production company that made its
mm,
journey to Netflix. But at the time, we didn't know it was going to be on Netflix. But I've worked on Netflix projects as well, and I have to say that the process is the same. It's still a shoot. There's still a lot of people on set. There's a lot of talent from the cast to the crew to the production. You're surrounded by talented people. There's long days um, that are very rewarding.
mm.
I can't say that it's very different. Honestly, I'd say that working for a project on Netflix or working for a project for TV or film, in terms of the actual shooting process, is the
Yeah,
same. The only difference is, a lot of times with theatrical releases, a movie will be released in America and then in the UK and then other
right.
parts of Europe and then in Asia. Whereas the benefit of Netflix is that this movie is dropped on the same day worldwide, except for China,
Everywhere.
because they
Oh,
don't have Netflix in China, so they're getting a theatrical release. But
right.
everyone around the world will be able to view it on the same day, um, which gives a lot more access, I feel, to people who maybe aren't comfortable going to a movie theater right now.
Mm. Yeah, and I think obviously even before the pandemic, Netflix was a gift because, as you said, everywhere all at once would get access to it for sure. And I think it's a perfect thing to have in a time like this in order to get that widespread reach for it. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I know I mentioned like some of like the like TV appearances you've made like at the very start, but do any like projects pre or I mean I was gonna say pre or post fatherhood. I don't know how many you've done since then, but like do any more like stand out in your mind?
So we just premiered the final episode. I did this series called Dungeons and Distancing. And
Right.
I courageous nerd is the perfect way to put it, because it's basically this group of very different friends who play Dungeons and Dragons, and they have to adapt for the pandemic. So they're playing over Zoom. So yeah, you get to see the live gameplay. I play Casey the Dungeon Master, so I get to take on all these crazy characters like an
Mm,
ogre and a little weasel and wizards and play with different voices. But you also get to see the relationship dynamics between all of these characters and the story, the drama between them. So we just released the sixth episode a few weeks ago on YouTube, and now it's doing the festival circuit, and it's getting rave reviews. People who are avid players um,
yeah.
love it because they're like, this is how it really is. And people that I know, and even people that I don't know who've reached out to me who haven't played before, are just so eager to try to play now, because it was just such a fun shoot, and you can tell that we had fun making this project.
Mhm.
So definitely Dungeons and Distancing is one that is very special, and Canadian made.
Right.
It's very tremendous talents involved. That would be the most recent project that I worked on.
Yeah. Were you much of like a player before, like a player of Dungeons and Dragons, I should say, before joining that project, or
I
like
think
were
I was
you
the only
well
one who
versed?
didn't play. I was the only one
Oh.
who hadn't played. Everybody else, they're avid players. The creators are avid players.
Mm,
So it's different because you're going into this environment, and I can look up as much as I want online, but it's not the
yeah.
same as getting that firsthand experience. So I really had to rely on the creators and on my co-stars to teach me and educate me and let me know, okay, no, you'd actually roll here. I know this is actually a bigger deal than you think, and this is not as big of a deal. I kind of, I did a lot of research, but I kind of went in blindly anyways. But now I'm dying to play. So
Mm. Yeah, because I'm not sure about you, but I feel like it's been shown or like depicted so often in pop culture that a lot of people might have like a broad idea of how it's played, or like kind of like, I mean, like Dungeon Master is a term I would know, but outside of that, I wouldn't have a clue about Dungeons and Dragons. But like, would you have had that broad like knowledge just because it's been like so many different like shows and films and so on and so forth?
exactly. Like, you know about it. Like I've seen it, on like the Big Bang Theory. And
Yeah,
you imagine you imagine that's how I imagine the players to be. But in
like
reality,
Sheldon Cooper. Yeah.
exactly. And in reality, after working on the show, I'm meeting so many people of very different backgrounds and different energies and personalities who are avid players. I just don't know about it because it's like this secret society
Mm,
that I wasn't invited, and now I'm invited to the secret society. It's a very niche. It's a culture on its own, and it's
yeah.
very fascinating.
Yeah, and I suppose actually then just to ask, this is the last like pre-prepared question I had, but I suppose how would you like tease fatherhood anyone who might be, I mean, as we were kind of saying, anyone who's familiar with the real life story or anyone who might have been like, oh, Kevin Hart is probably going to be good. Like, how would you kind of, yeah, kind of like tease it, I suppose.
So so for people who know who Kevin Hart is,
Mm,
like who are familiar with his work, which that's the whole world, um, you don't know who Kevin Hart is. That's
mm,
the biggest thing that I will say is get ready to see a side of Kevin Hart that you have never seen because he and I work a lot in dramatic projects as well. Um,
yeah.
but I expected him to perform, like a comedian would perform in in drama. But he
Mm,
blew me away. He blew me away. And if you've seen any of the clips, he is killing it. And I think that it's a totally different side of Kevin that people are not expecting to see,
mm,
with the comedy as well. And I think just to anybody who's not familiar with the story, get ready to it's like a story of fatherly love and overcoming obstacles despite despair, because this man lost the love of his life less than 2 days after delivering their baby girl. So
mm,
he was grieving and learning how to be a parent to this girl and raising her in the best way that he can. Um, and knowing that it's a true story and seeing how far they've come now and watching throughout the movie, maybe he finds love again. Um, just get ready to fall in love with Kevin and Melody Hurd, who she's one of the stars of Them on Amazon Prime right now. People
mm.
will fall in love with them and the real Matt Logelin and Maddie because they're exceptional people. That's what I would say. Just get ready to fall in love. Bring your tissues, but you'll laugh as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great point you brought up because I think there's been like a history before of like comedians surprising you and being really great in dramatic parts. I'm thinking of like Robin Williams had a
Yeah.
couple of like, I mean, Good Will Hunting, Dead Poet Society. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether like it's just that them as individuals able to pull this off, but I think it's pretty incredible that they can.
You
You
know what
know.
it is? I think that, and I had this discussion recently on a panel, but I believe that to do stand-up comedy at the level that Kevin Hart or like Robin Williams,
Mm,
certain people who are really doing comedy about their life, and it takes a obviously it takes a level of creativity and humor, but it takes a lot of vulnerability to put it out there and to risk hurting feelings, offending people, not being laughed at, people not finding it funny. And I think that that vulnerability, um, if it helps you because it takes vulnerability to do these dramatic roles as well. So I think that with the right connection to what you're working on, and the appropriate support and coaching around you, it's not an easy quote unquote transition, but I
Mm.
think that it can be quite seamless for some people because they're already comfortable being vulnerable, which is the biggest hurdle for drama, is the vulnerability.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose just to say then, best of luck with the release, and yes, all the best, and stay safe and take care.
Thank you so much, Connor. It was a pleasure.